Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Crit and Crit. I'm Scint.
I'm Axion.
And we are continuing our partial playthrough of Pokemon Christmas while we finish off our discussion on A Christmas Carol. We've spent a fair bit of time on what is honestly a very, very short work of literature, but really what we've been wanting to look at is just the sheer impact it had, and that's what we've decided to dedicate this final episode to, just to why it was written from Dickens' perspective and how it's been received by people. So, Axion, your thoughts before I go off on a tangent?
I mean, it's obvious that Dickens had opinions primarily about the situation of how workers interacted with their employers and how the differences between the rich and the poor in his society, how people were advantaged or disadvantaged.
And I mean, I think that's fairly obvious to anyone who's read, like, the vast majority of Dickens' work. Like, I think
precisely.
Tale of Two Cities is the only one that doesn't, to my fading memory, it's been a hot minute since I've read that one, have, like, a character who is explicitly in dire economic straits. The conflict in that was, since it was all about the French Revolution, was much more inherently political, as, Charles Darnay was a French aristocrat being hidden from the guillotine, and, sorry, tangent, like I warned. But, like, that's one of his best-known works, and I think it's the only one that doesn't feature, like, someone struggling with social class in some way. And in many cases, this was autobiographical. Like, I remember reading in a few places that David Copperfield drew fairly heavily from his own experiences in having to leave school and go to workhouses.
Right.
I do want to verify that to be sure, but it's a recurring theme in enough of his work. Like, Oliver Twist, which came out a fair bit before A Christmas Carol, is all about an unimpoverished orphan who ends up on the streets and falling in with a thieves guild just to get by, which was adapted by Disney, all hail, into a movie about animated dogs and a cat. Oliver and Company. Yay!
Yay.
But yeah, so he did not shy away from looking at just the dire straits many people found themselves in, because it was something he experienced personally, and it honestly was a hefty factor of the politics of his era. It would be very easy to say that he's specifically calling out one philosopher in particular who had been about a decade dead at that point, Thomas Malthus.
So, not gonna explain that one?
I wasn't sure if you were going to say anything.
You are definitely more familiar with Malthus than I am. I have only a really passing... only a really passing exposure to him, whereas you are far, far more educated on the subject, so I was gonna leave this one in your ballpark. First,
one, you killed Tiny Tim. Two, you swapped from a ghost that just got crit to death with Bite to another ghost that's gonna get crit to death with Bite. And second, and like, furthermore, like, I actually don't know that much about Malthus beyond him existing. I kind of looked into him more thanks to watching a musical that my college performed before I graduated, which, Urinetown ends with a call-out to Thomas Malthus, since the whole show is about overpopulation and a shortage of resources, is effectively leading to either a hardcore lockdown on necessities or the eventual death of the population.
Right.
So, I know that sounds really bleak, but it is one of the funniest shows I've ever seen. But anyway, Malthus is probably who was being mentioned when Scrooge first complained about the poor laws and then just dropped his hot take on, well, but why don't they just die and get rid of the surplus population? Because Malthus was very, very concerned about overpopulation. He thought industrialization and increase of resources would just lead to more population, and therefore resources would just continue to forever and ever run short. So, therefore, he was very, very against, increasing the population in situations where people couldn't afford it, because he had 3 kids himself, because it's okay if he increases the population, but yeah.
I mean, there's probably a lot of commentary that could be made upon limitations for you but not for me sort of thing, but that's a rabbit hole, and we're going to be going down enough rabbit holes as it is.
And yeah, like I said, I am not an expert on Malthusian economics or philosophy with that. I'm familiar with his existence and have the bare bones basics to at least understand how Dickens could have been making commentary about him. But like another politician I've heard come up around this topic, who wasn't really relevant at the time of A Christmas Carol's publication, but I think I've mentioned him in another video, Charles Trevelyan, who would be put in charge of officially, I think it was called relief for the potato famine. I would strongly disagree with that being an accurate term for what actually happened with that, but I don't want to keep diving down the rabbit hole of something that was very clearly not Dickens' intention, since, you know, Doctor Who had not yet been created by the BBC, so time travel wasn't a thing.
Right.
But yeah, there were quite a few fairly influential thinkers and politicians around Dickens' time who wanted, you know, less relief to the poor because, you know, good old Christian work ethic in merry old England was a thing, and, you know, it's clearly, you know, we don't want to help the idle poor. They should be doing they should be working to improve themselves and everything to do with that. So, I mean, Scrooge even outright says, like, what relief? Like, are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? The poor laws are in effect, and the poor laws, for those who don't know, were like a sort of welfare system in place at the time, with constant debates and revisions about whether or not people would be, like, deserving or undeserving poor, who is allowed to get these benefits, etc., etc., etc.
That sounds familiar from our last book.
I mean, it's almost like when you have a long-standing set of issues in a society, they're not going to go away overnight. Shaw was Irish by birth, but he did spend a lot of time in London, similarly to Dickens, and, well, Pygmalion was only written about 70 years after A Christmas Carol, and just look at our society today. Are we still kind of debating issues that had been raised 70 years ago? In many cases, yeah. Like, history repeats itself. Yeah, just like I'm saying, history repeats itself. You'll have different names of different sides, and there will be some details changing, but overall, themes are recurrent. That's why classic literature, like A Christmas Carol, manages to still resonate decades upon decades after the immediate issues it's meant to address fall away, because there's always going to be a new source of strife, because if you have two people in a room, you have a conflict. The conflict could be as simple as, I don't want crust on my peanut butter sandwich, but it is still a conflict, a disagreement of some sort. So if you have a society on a large scale, you're obviously going to have infinite amounts of disagreement, which obviously we do, hence Scrooge's general existence.
Right.
But yeah, like, Dickens obviously wanted to call attention to the economic disparity of the upper and working class in his native Britain at the time, because, well, it was an ongoing thing. It would resonate with the people who read it, so he could guarantee that people would want to read it, and, you know, there'd be an audience for it, which would mean he could make money off of it and keep a living going. Because, you know, I mean, all the thoughts in the world about equality aside, man's gotta eat. So, yeah.
I do believe he was in debt at the time that he wrote the story, and he kind of
needed
the footnote in the
yeah. I think there was a footnote on the book that indicated that, and yeah, debt was a thing. I mean, debt was a thing long before that as well. I mean, that's how the state of Georgia exists. Like, this is not a slur against Georgia or anything. It was literally founded as a debtor's colony. So, transported to the New World was a punishment in many cases for that. But it's also interesting to talk about just, like, not just the intent of the book, which we clearly have talked about to death, because it's interesting how economic the book actually is, considering what we remember is the heartwarming Scrooge learns to care about friends and family story. But it honestly is entirely focused around Scrooge, what are you going to do with your money, because really the main benefit he provides the Cratchits at the end is, it's not the turkey. I mean, the turkey, I'm sure, is great, but it's that he gives Bob a raise, so he can, you know, afford to take care of his family and save Tiny Tim. So, money is the solution to the problems instigated in that book. So, well,
Yep.
it's kind of hard to avoid talking about economics if you're going to talk about the plot of A Christmas Carol.
Yep. To kind of summarize in modern terms, Dickens would be what, in the past 30 years or so, we would have called a compassionate conservative. He wasn't interested in using the government to provide supply or money to people. He wanted business owners and employers to treat their employees and their workers better and fix society that way.
Yeah, Dickens did not want like a huge social revolution from anything I've read. It's nothing is ever like Les Miserables level. Like, we're going to get a student revolution together and we're going to barricade the streets and we're going to have a firefight and see if that gets some change through. Spoilers, it doesn't. Basically, everybody but Valjean dies there.
We'll get to that eventually in the future,
yeah.
probably.
But it's always about, like, and then I got a better job with a good, kind employer, and I'm going to inherit the business, and all lived happily ever after, except for the obvious villain like Uriah Heep. So, like, Dickens really just wanted people to be better to each other, and that would be his focus for... They really did change this up. You don't even have to sail across the ocean.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we did, but on the boat to go to the island. Actually, should
okay,
some more potions
the other...
stuff.
You know what I mean,
what
like, you look at it.
Yeah, I should get, like, supplies and stuff before I try to find her. But yes, I knew what you meant.
Has her typing changed? Like, she's still going to use her Steelix and everything?
I think so.
So, since you're going to have to spend a lot of money to fight her, is that kind of a steal on your resources?
No.
Anyway, to get back to the point I've kind of lost track of, A Christmas Carol, I think, had kind of a similar reaction that The Jungle did, in the sense of, like, Dickens wanted to shine a light on how employers interact with their employees and look at all the good you can do if you just, care about other people. But what kind of tended to happen was people going, yeah, I remember all these great things about Christmas. I remember this, and it kind of kept Christmas more relevant, for lack of a better way to put it. Christmas was, it's a once-a-year holiday, and some employers paid more attention to it than others, but it wasn't quite the big deal that we know of it today. Honestly, thinking back in older English literature I've read, one of the holidays I remember seeing mentioned more, like in Jane Austen novels, was Michaelmas, which I believe is in September. And it was kind of just seen as an opportunity for, I think it was the Bennets to go to a ball over at the Bingleys, but it's been a bit since I've read that, so I'm not entirely sure offhand. But Christmas could have very well faded into obscurity without something like A Christmas Carol just to plop down in the market and suddenly everyone is having collective societal nostalgia for the holiday they've always grown up with, and that made it more important to people. So it's just kind of interesting.
And that's, as we've said many times, that's kind of carried forward into the modern day with how society treats Christmas nowadays as the biggest holiday ever, but also just the general concept of Christmas as the time to be generous, the time to be giving, the time to do things for people.
Though I actually would argue with that, because I kind of, honestly, speaking as someone who's got over a decade of working retail under her belt, I kind of think society as a whole has missed the boat on what Dickens actually meant by keep Christmas always in your heart.
Oh, definitely. I was meaning more just the cultural idea, if not necessarily the practice.
Yeah, the cultural idea is that every year you get together with loved ones and exchange gifts. I think the focus has gotten far, far more heavily on the exchanging gifts part of it than the spend time with your loved ones. Because otherwise, there wouldn't be the level of stress and anxiety that hangs over everyone in terms of making sure you get a gift that doesn't bankrupt you, but also doesn't make you look cheap or thoughtless or insensitive, because you want to get that perfect balance of looking thoughtful and, conscientious and generous, but you have to do that for everyone.
Right.
A lot of businesses get by solely on the fourth quarter and the Black Friday Christmas sales. So, yeah, we have absolutely kind of missed the boat here in that a novel talking about how the greed of employers actively causes harm to society, we've just kind of built society to function entirely on consumerism that benefits from this holiday that Dickens wanted to be more about care for thy fellow man.
That's capitalism.
But yeah, I don't know how I feel about it, because like I also have a lot of fond memories of Christmas, but like the older I get, the less magical it seems and the more cynical it's very easy to become about it.
Right.
Especially in terms of just seeing like how many people were trampled on Black Friday because they wanted to get something for a kid, and how many people were trying to get that to, hawk it on eBay for like $1,000. But it's, I don't know. I don't think it's something that Dickens would have overtly approved of. Not that he would have had much say.
It just would have been straight up not approved of, I think. That's my opinion anyway.
Yeah, this is where we start getting into the death of the author, though, because like we literally cannot check what the author says. And,
exactly.
And like to explain for those who are not familiar with the concept, death of the author just means the author's influence over a work dies the minute it gets in the reader's hands, because you cannot control what the reader is going to interpret from what you have written. It does not mean actually going out and shanking someone for writing a book. I know it sounds a little like that, but no, it's just straight up. Once the reader has the book belongs to the readers. The readers are going to come up with any interpretation they want for it. They can back it up. They can read stuff into it that isn't there, like I've actually done in this episode with the comparison to Trevelyan. I know for a fact Dickens didn't intend that, because Trevelyan's policies with the potato famine had not gone into practice, and Dickens can't see the future.
Yep.
But that is an interpretation that I could prove with text evidence. I can find plenty of quotes about the poor need to take care of themselves, surplus population, something, why are you celebrating, da 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 da, to back up my point, and it would make a fairly coherent piece of reading. But it's probably not what Dickens thought. That doesn't make my reading, according to general principles of literary analysis, any less valid, because I can still make a convincing argument for it. And that's kind of what makes these sorts of discussions as interesting as they are. You can have two people read the same passage and have completely opposite interpretations. As an English teacher, I see this come up a lot in class, where like assigning something and asking people, okay, which character is at fault? If I have 5 kids, I will get 5 different reads on something. They might agree on the character, but they'll pick different pieces of evidence to say, this is how I know this character is responsible, and here's what that means. So it's just, reading doesn't stop when you read the book, because you can get an entirely different experience from a novel from talking about it with people who bring their own different experiences and perspectives to reading something. And it just makes it so much more interesting. I mean, it's the same principle as watching TV. Who watches a sitcom or anything and just sits on the couch and goes, well, this is never leaving my head again? You watch things because it gives you something to engage with your fellow man about. You shared experience, even if you experience that slightly differently. And I just think it makes reading all the more relevant, especially considering that it just basically means HBO or someone's probably going to take a book series and try to milk another Game of Thrones miniseries out of it.
I mean, they are literally doing that with, what are they doing now? Wheel of Time, I think?
Man, there's going to be a lot of braid tugging. But, yeah, I'm not really sure where else to go from here. Do you have any thoughts to add?
I think that pretty much wraps it up. I think that kind of summarizes everything we could possibly say about Christmas Carol. I think that we've pretty much summed up all the details on the plot itself, and given up a nice little wrap it up on a bow with the social commentary. I'm sure if we wanted to do a modern interpretation of some sort, that we would be able to spend hours on comparing that to the real world politics and the modern situations of things, and we could probably spend another good 5 or 6 episodes on that, but that's a rabbit hole we don't particularly want to go down, and I don't think that a lot of viewers would find that as entertaining, and there are channels who are better qualified to do things like that.
Yeah, I mean, we're literally playing Pokemon and just talking about a book. Like, it's not super in-depth, we're bored nerds.
Yep. And we will return to Pokemon Christmas sometime, probably around this time next year. But it will be with a different story. Any final comments?
Should have gone to the ice gym to finish off, but...
Yeah, well, I can't get there because there's an avalanche in the way. But...
Oh, right. Actually, this is still really appropriate, because we're wrapping up our Christmas discussion and, the talk about goodwill toward man by not going to the fighting gym.
Thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoyed, and we will be back next time with a story that's pure magic. And a little bit of a headache.
I absolutely have to do this. God bless us, everyone!
See you next time, folks.
Bye!